The train had long since hissed away into the distance, leaving only the sound of wind against worn boards and boots scraping dirt. She stepped down with a small bundle clutched to her chest, a velvet pouch, faded blue, tied tight with a fraying ribbon. Dust curled around her ankles like smoke from a dying fire. Her dress, once cream, was gray now. Everything about her was like something touched too often by grief. The station master didn't speak to her, just pointed down the road, where the wooden sign in the town square swung slightly in the breeze. Auction today, mail order brides. She walked, slowly, as though the dirt road itself were judging each step. She heard no birds, just the creak of rope from the old gallows that still stood, and used but threatening, like a warning not meant for the eyes but for the soul. By the time she reached the edge of the square, the town had gathered. Women with arms folded, eyes sharp, men with boots spread and spit drying in the sun, children with too much knowing in their faces. She stood beneath the sign. She did not cry. She did not speak. But her fingers, pale as wax, clutched tighter around the velvet pouch. Inside it, the letter she'd carried for months, dried herbs still pressed inside it, the ink smudged but still readable. To the man who wants a child, I will come. I will work. I will be yours. The man who wrote her back had been blunt. Jeb Carter, rancher, middle-aged, widowed, no use for frills, he wrote. Just need someone who can give me sons. And so she came. The sheriff, Grafton, a man built like a scarecrow made of anger and leather, raised his voice. Well, now, he called out, pulling her forward like she were cattle to be measured. This here is Annaline Monroe, 26, came all the way from Missouri. Sturdy, can cook, and tend to fire like nobody's business. Claimed by Mr. Jeb Carter. Eyes turned toward the side of the crowd. Jeb stood with his thumbs hooked into his belt, dust on his hat. Flat eyes. He didn't step forward, just tipped his chin and said loud enough for everyone to hear, I withdraw my claim. The crowd stirred. Whispers like brush fire. Sheriff Grafton scowled. Withdraw? She came for you. Jeb's voice was cold as the iron on the jail bars. Ain't no use marrying a woman who can't bear fruit. It was a slap without motion. Her face didn't change. Only the pouch tightened in her fist. One of the town women coughed into her hand and muttered, Barren bride's just a mouth to feed. A boy snickered. Maybe she's cursed. She looked like a ghost already, said another. She stood still through it, like she'd practiced the stillness, like she'd lived through worse storms than this. Grafton sighed. Well then, anyone else cared a bit on Miss Monroe? Silence. Not a hand raised. Flies buzzed near the horse trough. A dog barked once, then fell quiet. She didn't look down. She didn't plead. She just stared straight ahead, past them all, as if she might find a sea there instead of this bit of sunburned earth. And then, from the far edge of the crowd, a figure moved. Leather boots stepped forward, deliberate, soundless. A tall man, broad-shouldered, skin sun-kissed and scarred. Long black hair tied at the nape. He wore no badge, no expression, just silence that followed him like a second skin. 5 children followed him, staggered in age like steps down a staircase, their faces unreadable. One of them carried a carved horse. Another held a small woven doll. The town stiffened. A Comanche, someone whispered. What's he doing here? Watch your horses, another muttered. But the man said nothing, walked straight up to the platform where she stood. Looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her, like he'd known her pain long before the square. He turned his gaze to the sheriff. I'll take her. The words were simple. Not a question, not a request. Just air shaped into something final. Gasps. Grafton blinked, taken aback. You what? You can't. The Comanche nodded once, then pointed to his chest. Awan. He gestured to the children behind him. 5. They need. He said nothing more. Grafton scratched his head, spit, then looked at the crowd. No one else stepped forward. No other man raised his hand. She's yours then, I suppose, the sheriff muttered, almost spitefully. Still no one moved. Then, slowly, Annaline stepped down from the platform. Her legs were steady. Her fingers still clutched the pouch. But her eyes, which had been clouded for so long, caught a glint of something in his. Not rescue, not pity, just presence. Awan turned, and she followed, through the parting crowd, past the town that had judged her worthless, past Jeb Carter, whose face turned crimson in the heat. She did not look back, and behind them, the 5 children walked, shadows trailing stars, and Annaline's gray dress fluttered once in the wind, as if remembering what it felt like to be claimed by nothing but the earth. And so they left, not as lovers, not even as strangers, but as two kind of silence, finding in each other a place to begin. The sky above the canyon glowed with the amber hush of evening as they arrived. The house sat low against a red rock, carved not for grandeur but for survival. Wind pressed against it like an old hand brushing over familiar wood, and the cedar beams held a memory of storm and fire. Annaline stepped out of the wagon and looked up at the windows. Faces were there, pressed against the glass, blinking out like stars at twilight. 5 children, 5 pairs of eyes. They did not come out to greet her. Awan lifted her small bundle from the wagon bed and set it gently on the porch. He didn't speak, didn't motion. He simply turned and walked around the side of the house toward the woodpile, his silhouette dissolving into the soft dusk. She stood alone on the steps for a breath too long, then opened the door and stepped inside. It smelled of smoke and worn leather, cumin and cedar and faint lavender. The floor was swept clean, the fire low, a blanket lay folded on a bench, and a single chair faced a hearth. Her room was small, a cot with a quilt tucked tight, a basin, a cracked mirror, a windowsill full of smooth river stones. She did not cry. She did not smile. She placed a velvet pouch beside the basin and unwrapped her only dress, the blue one with patched sleeves. Then she slept. In the morning, no one woke her. The sun did, crawling across the floor like a quiet visitor. The house remained hushed, not with tension, but with the kind of quiet people build when they've already lost too much. She found the garden behind the house, half wild and thirsting. She knelt there without instruction and began to pull weeds. Kachi found her first. 6 years old, barefoot, his shirt buttoned wrong, and a chicken feather stuck behind one ear. He circled her like a hawk, asking, "Why don't you got babies? Did your belly break?" She paused, stirring her fingernails, and looked at him. Not shocked, not offended, just present. "Some bellies bloom like fields," she said softly. "Mine never did, but I can still plant good things." He nodded like he understood something deeper than he should have, then ran off yelling, "She plants good things." By afternoon, she had patched 2 sleeves, boiled water, and folded blankets that had sat crumpled since winter. The twins, Luma and Naeli, passed in the hall without speaking, but she heard them singing in Comanche before dawn the next morning. The song had no sharpness, no hurry, just rise and fall like the breath of the land itself. Tali was harder, 14, sharp-eyed, already wearing the world like armor. She didn't speak for 3 days, watched Annaline like she expected her to vanish. When Annaline mended a torn hem on her dress, Tali didn't say thank you, but the next day she left her a basket of apricots near the stairs. It was Hosea who broke her. Late one night, after the rest had gone to sleep, she heard a shuffle near her door. She opened it to find him there, 10 years old, thin, holding a shirt with both hands. No words, just wide, waiting eyes. She knelt, took the shirt gently, sat on the floor beside her bed, and began to sew. He stayed beside her, watching, his head tilted until it rested lightly against her shoulder. He did not speak, but he breathed, and didn't pull away. When Awan passed by in the hall and saw them, he paused. Then he whispered something so soft it nearly dissolved in the night. "He hasn't touched anyone since his ma passed." She didn't reply, just kept stitching, steady and sure. The boy's breath slow against her sleeve. From then on, things shifted. The house didn't get louder, but it got fuller. Annaline began humming as she cooked. Simple tunes, old lullabies from her grandmother's porch in Missouri. The girls began to sit closer to her in the evenings, not speaking, just listening. The kind of silence that meant comfort, not absence. Awan rarely spoke, but when he did, it was like listening to Riverstone's tumble. Purposeful, clean. He joined her once while she was picking beans, wordlessly, handing her pods like it was the most natural thing in the world. When their hands brushed over a basket handle, neither flinched. One night, while passing him a bowl of stew, her fingers touched his, warm, calloused. He didn't pull away. His gaze met hers. And for a long, soft moment, nothing moved. No declarations. No hunger. Just recognition. Like two souls remembering something the world tried to make them forget. By the end of the week, the children had begun calling her Annie. Not Ma. Not yet. Just Annie. But it held warmth. She stitched a small red bird onto Hosea's shirt. He wore like armor. The velvet pouch still sat by her basin, but she hadn't opened it since that first night. She didn't need the letter anymore. She was beginning to matter, not because of what she lacked, but because of who she was in the quiet between heartbeats. And that was something no auction, no man, no barren whisper could ever take away. The rain came soft and sudden, like a prayer whispered into the earth. It hissed over the roof and kissed the windows with gentle fingers, the kind that asked to be let in rather than forced. Inside, the fire danced low and warm, licking the hearth with orange sighs. The twins sat at the table, flour in their hair and dough on their cheeks, giggling as Annaline guided their small hands through kneading. She didn't scold. She didn't correct. She just laughed with them, a quiet, full-bodied sound that filled the room like the smell of baking bread. Awan sat near the fire, carving a length of cedar into something unknown. His hands were steady, movement slow, eyes catching the light now and then when he looked toward her. Not every time. Just enough. The room glowed, not from the fire, from them, from the way time moved slower in their presence. One of the twins, Luma or Naeli, it was hard to tell in that moment, looked up mid-laugh and called out, "Ma, look," holding up a lopsided lump of dough shaped like a bird. The words stopped everything. The laughter, the movement, even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Annaline froze, hands caked in flour. She didn't speak, just smiled and nodded gently. Later that night, when all the children had gone to bed, she slipped outside and wept beneath the eaves. Quietly, not from sorrow, from the ache of being seen in a way she never thought she'd be again. The next morning, a small bundle of dried wildflowers sat on the sill near her basin, yellow and purple, gathered from far up the ridge. Awan said only, for the window. That was all, but she kept them there even when the petals began to fade. Their rhythm became real, unspoken, like two notes of the same song. She fetched water, and he chopped wood. She sewed, and he sharpened tools beside her. One evening, as twilight wrapped the house in honey and hush, they sat outside on the porch. He spoke softly, watching the sky. She was gentle, he said. My first wife. Luma and Naeli get their songs from her. Annaline didn't respond, just waited. She died fast, he continued. A sickness that didn't wait to be named. He didn't say more, but in his silence, she heard the ache of memory, not comparison. You don't speak of her often, Annaline said. She lived once. That's enough. A moment passed. Then another. He looked at her, really looked. I've never known someone who stayed kind after breaking, he said. She held his gaze, and for once didn't look away. No touch passed between them. No kiss. No pull. Just a kind of knowing. A recognition deeper than bone. The next day, the children were out by the stream when the rider came. The hooves struck the earth too hard. The dust rose too high. She saw him from the porch and knew, before the hat came off. Jeb Carter. His face was pinched, his pride crumpled, still wearing the same bitterness he'd spit weeks ago. You've got nerve, he said, dismounting like the land owed him welcome. She didn't flinch. Awan stepped out from the shadows, silent and tall, arms crossed. Jeb sneered. I came to make an offer. A fair one. She was promised, paid for. No, she said. Her voice was calm, steady as a church bell. I was purchased, then discarded. You lost the right to speak on promises. You think this is better? Jeb spat. Living with savages? Awan's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. She belongs to me. Jeb snapped. Annaline stepped forward. I was never yours to return. You're still barren, he hissed. You're still nothing. She didn't blink. I am loved, she said, each word a stone laid in the soil beneath her feet. And that is more than you will ever be. The world held its breath. Awan didn't need to defend her. She had already claimed her place. Jeb looked between them, saw that he was outnumbered not in muscle, but in meaning. He mounted up and rode off without another word. The dust settled behind him. Inside, the fire was still warm. The bread had risen. The children's laughter returned like it had never left. And Awan, watching her from across the room, saw not a stranger, but a woman who had turned a broken name into something holy. He carved her likeness into cedar that night. Didn't tell her. Just tucked it in the windowsill beside the flowers. In her room, the velvet pouch still sat unopened. She no longer needed to prove her worth. She was home. The sun cracked open the sky in shades of blood and rust, painting the canyon in sorrow and fire. It was too early for riders, too still for dust, yet the ground trembled, the kind of hush before a storm not made of rain, but reckoning. Awan was already on the porch when the first shadow crested the ridge, his knife sheathed, his rifle untouched, his hands empty, but his stance solid as a stone beneath his boots. Behind him, the children gathered like fledglings in a nest, bare feet on cool planks, fingers tangled in one another. Tali stood tall, her eyes flicking toward the hills. Hosea clung to Kachi's sleeve. Luma and Naeli hummed a wordless tune, the melody a shaky shield against what was coming. Annaline stepped out from the doorway. She wore her blue dress, now clean, mended, and kissed by morning light. She said nothing, simply stood beside Awan, her shoulders back, her voice folded deep in her chest, waiting for the moment to rise. They came not as a posse, but as a mob, born from one man's bitterness, fed by the town's hunger to feel righteous. 10, maybe 12 of them, men with twitchy hands and faces weathered not by sun, but resentment. One held a rope. Another gripped a Bible like a blade. Jeb Carter rode in front. His smile was thin, his eyes sunken with the weight of his own failures. She belongs in town, he called. Among her own, not living in sin with a savage. No one moved. The wind picked up, swirling the dust like ghosts around their feet. She ain't yours, one of the men added. Not rightly. There was no preacher, no paper. She's white. She was paid for. She ran. The accusations came in bursts, brittle and sharp. Annaline felt her knees wanted to bend. Old fear tried to pull her back into the dirt, where shame used a nest. But she stood her ground. The truth was heavier than shame now. It held her like roots. I was sold, she said, her voice low but clear. For what I could not give. They stilled. But here, she looked at Awan, at the children behind them. Here, I was loved for what I am. The silence split, and one man, face red with fury, raised his gun and fired into the sky. A warning, not a threat. Yet it cracked the morning like a whip. The children flinched. Hosea hid behind Annaline's skirt. Tali stepped in front of the twins. Awan took one step forward. Just one. But it felt like thunder rolling off the mesa. His voice rolled deep, each word a stake driven into the earth. Come for her, he said, and you come for my children. Another step. You will not survive it. The words didn't need a weapon behind them, just the weight of truth, and the knowing in his eyes. They had already lost too much to lose again, without taking the world down with him. The men looked to one another. No orders came. No one moved. No one wanted to be the first to cross that invisible line between foolishness and fate. The man with the rope dropped it. Someone muttered a curse and turned their horse around. Jeb sat longest, jaw tight, eyes small, but even he knew when a fight was already lost. Not by strength, by something older. He spat into the dirt and rode off last. The mob faded with the sun's rise. When it was over, the canyon felt different, as if it had inhaled deeply and exhaled peace. Awan didn't speak. He simply turned and opened the door, letting the children rush in first. Laughter did not return right away, but it would. It always did. That night, the stars shimmered low and close, like they were listening. Annaline sat beside the fire, the children sleeping nearby, the scent of sage drifting through the house like lullabies. Awan sat across from her, then reached for her hand. His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "You gave me back more than a wife," he said. "You gave us back hope." She wept, not from sorrow, not even from joy, but from something deeper, the ache of finally arriving after so many years of wandering in someone else's silence. And then small footsteps. Hosea padded toward her. He didn't speak at first, just climbed into her lap, his fingers curled in the folds of her dress. And then, "Ma." One word, cracked and whispered, but whole. Her heart shattered and stitched in the same breath. She kissed the top of his head and rocked him until the fire faded low. Outside, the canyon slept. The stars watched over them. And if you ride west past that place, past the red rock and cedar, past the river where the children sing, you might still hear laughter floating like dandelion seeds on the wind. And so, the woman they called Barren became the heartbeat of a home, not by bearing children, but by healing souls. And if you ever find yourself wondering what makes a life worthy, listen close. You don't have to birth life to give it meaning. You just have to love without condition.